Welcome to another ISCA podcast series. Today, having with us Martin Lim.
Hi.
Hi Martin, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. So my name is Martin. I'm from Engineering Solutions. I'm the founder and I'm also the CEO of Engineering Solutions. So what do? We provide anti-money laundering solutions to non-bank sectors that are regulated for anti-money laundering. So we do have customers all over the region, primarily in Singapore, in Hong Kong, and also in Malaysia. And our target market, people like public accountants, lawyers, dealers in precious stone, precious metals, and estate agents, and also company services providers. So these are our main target users. And what do we provide them? We provide them with anti-money laundering system for them to comply with the local anti-money laundering laws and regulation. Yeah, so this is our main business, right? And of course, for me, I've been in this industry for more than 10 years, and I do help non-bank businesses gear up to comply and also to help protect them against criminal funds going through their business. Yeah.
Recently, as you know, the two countries, Vietnam and Singapore, have upgrading the relationship to comprehensive strategic partnership. Right, come with this partnership, there will be a lot of trading between two countries. So, you know, in the simplest term, can you tell the audience first is what is AML, what is anti-money laundering in the simplest term, and how is that upgrading between two countries will be affected in terms of anti-money laundering?
Right, sure. Yeah, so for those of you who are new to this term anti-money laundering, so basically it is a process, or rather let me explain what is money laundering. So money laundering is a process where criminal, after they go through their criminal activities, they will make profits, right? So in order for them to use this profit, they need to convert it to look like a legitimate source of funds so that they can use it openly, right? So they have to go through this process called money laundering, right? And typically, they will go through a few stages. They need to inject this cash or whatever profits they have into the financial system and then move it across borders and then do all sorts of smoke screen activities to hide this source of funds, and then finally they can use it, right? So this is, in a nutshell, what money laundering looks like, right? So anti-money laundering basically is to prevent them from converting the illegal profits into legal profits, right? And in the past, these anti-money laundering measures, controls are usually focused on financial institutions like banks, right? But since like 10 over years ago, there's a lot of countries, they have started to push this regulation on non-bank sectors, right? And they focus more on those higher risk businesses that has got high chance of being abused by criminals for money laundering in one of their so-called money laundering activities, right? So these are, for example, public accountants, lawyers, you know, company services providers, because these are the professions that could be abused in their course of doing their business activities or services. These services could be abused by criminals to do, for example, set up trust, set up legal entities to help them gain access to the bank account, right? So these are usually the higher risk sectors, and more and more you see that a lot of the countries or jurisdictions, they will put in place anti-money laundering laws to require all these non-bank sectors to put in place control measures to prevent money laundering. Yeah. So that's in general what money laundering is about. So you also mentioned about the cooperation between Vietnam and Singapore has also stepped up because of the cross-border financial strategic comprehensive agreement, right, that we have signed recently. I believe is a good direction, right direction, and with this framework, you can see that there will be a lot more investment coming into Vietnam and a lot more businesses that will cooperate with Vietnam businesses. And with that, of course, you think that you can expect that there will be a lot more transaction, a lot more funds going between the two countries, right? And it is important for anti-money laundering laws to put in place or control measures to be put in place because we don't want people to look at Vietnam or Singapore as a channel for them to launder money, right? Because when you start to have a lot of transactions going between these countries, it opens up a lot of avenues, a lot of ways for criminals to so-called hide behind all these transactions to launder money, right? So that's why I believe Vietnam also has got just revised their anti-money laundering laws in 2023, right? I believe it is also a way for both countries, right, to cooperate to make sure that whatever business that go through between the two countries, they are not for illicit purposes, right? So that is, I think, in a nutshell, how I see this framework between Singapore and Malaysia, Vietnam will work. Yeah.
So, I mean, in recent years, right, Vietnam have combating the cybercrime and financial fraud. We have a lot of major case, right? So, for example, we have a deepfake video call that, they call the customer and faking as a banker. And, it caused a lot of chaos and, so, when we talk about cybercrime and financial fraud, what sort of like the emergent threat you think that Vietnam is facing now? And of course, I mean, Singapore is very well established, right? You guys have a lot of regulation, but Vietnam, we are very new to this. And as we implement the law and regulation, can you tell us what are some of the emergent threats to Vietnam market, and how do you see it's going to be in Vietnam, and how Singapore could support in terms of implementing and combating this threat?
Okay, so I think for cybercrime and online scams, these are persistent threats, right? Not only in Vietnam, I think even in Singapore, we have the same problem. I don't have the numbers for Vietnam, but based on the latest numbers from Singapore, in 2024, the total amount of money that is lost to scams, right, is about 822 million US dollars.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and this is 70%, 70, right, 70% more than the amount lost in 2023, right? But guess what? The number of scams that goes on in 2024, right, in terms of numbers, only went up by 10% compared to 2023. So what this means is that although the growth in the number of scam cases in Singapore didn't go that much, but the value lost per scam actually increased tremendously, right? And I believe this is the same in Vietnam and a lot of the countries, right? And what this means is that, scammers are getting more and more sophisticated, like what you say, right? There's technologies available for them to, fake video, fake identity, right? And nowadays, they can even use the internet, right, to profile their target victims, right? So they use social media. They can even use the deepfake to create their own personality, right? All this to target and trick victims into trusting them, and then from there they will they can mine, right, or they can scam more money out of each victims, right? So this is a problem with us, right? So in one way you look at technology is that it can be used to do a lot of wonderful things, right? Like AI, you can create, you can be more productive, right? And you can do more content, right, with AI. Same thing, these technologies are also available to criminals, right? And what this means is that they can also use the same technologies to be more productive, right? To do their scams. And this is persistent for all countries. I believe Vietnam is also facing the same issue, right? So what can we do, right? Firstly, I think if you look at Singapore, we are actually quite proactive in combating scams. So the law enforcement agencies has a lot of programs to educate the public, and we also amended our laws, right, to ensure that we can tame this threat. So one of the problems that I believe Vietnam is the same thing, right? Because these scams tends to be in larger scales, right? In terms of the amount of money that's being scammed. So to launder this money, there are new typologies that emerge, right? So they need to launder this money fast. So one of the things that they can, you can see in the past few years, especially after COVID, is that they want a lot of the criminal organization, they do it on a large scale. They recruit proxies, right? Pay them a little bit of commission fees, and then they use their bank account, right? Pay them a little bit of money, and then they so-called transfer small amount of money to all these huge, large number of bank accounts, right? And you can see this in Singapore, you can see this in Hong Kong. I believe it's the same thing in Vietnam, right?
Yep.
So they recruit men in the streets, right? Pay you a little bit of money, use your bank account, move small amount of money, right? So this is a persistent threat that we are facing now, right? So in Singapore, of course, we changed the law where we criminalize anybody who knowingly rent their bank account to anybody else, right? We also amended our law to say that if you do receive any money and you don't question, right, when it is very obvious that it could be suspicion, it is also an offense. So there's no need for me to prove that this money actually is a criminal money, right? So that's how we address it in Singapore, right? So we try to so-called control the supply side of the channels where criminal can launder money, right? So we have yet to see results. So I believe moving forward, this could be one direction which governments, right, can move towards, right? Basically tame the supply side, right, of the ways that they can launder money. So for business, I think one of the so not only they go after men in the street, so we also see typologies where they will make use of business, right? So we do have cases where, for example, retailers who sell precious stone, precious metals, luxury goods, right? We do have those criminals who will use their criminal proceeds to purchase this kind of luxury goods, and then they will try to go bring this to another country, and then they will liquidate it, right? So these are new typologies that we've seen in the past few years. And what can business do? Basically, I believe now it is not an issue with the bank where they need to prevent money laundering, right? Now, more and more you can see that I would always encourage businesses to put in place at least certain level of controls to identify suspicious transactions, right? So if you think that your customer, your counterparty is doing business with you for no good economic reasons, you should raise a red flag and you should step away, right? So this is how I think things have changed over the years.
I think it's interesting, Lee, that small amount is very hard to track, right? If you talk about money laundering, people usually think about $1,000, $1 million, $1 billion buying into real estate. But now when you talk about like a small account, we have 100 million people, right? 100 million more accounts in Vietnam, and imagine how many transactions per day that we have, right? So coming to that, how technology can help in terms of screening and stuff like that, because from my understanding is banks, right? They can just regulate and see transaction in and out. But like you say, how non-financial sectors like germ and stones and accounting, how do they use technology to combat this?
So yeah, this is a very interesting topic that you have raised, right? So you see, banks, they typically have resources, right, to detect, right, this kind of what we call smurfing. That means they know there's a threshold where bank will so-called flag up as suspicious transaction, right? So they purposely transact below those thresholds. So banks, they have the system, they have the processes in place to track all this, right? So banks have in their so-called toolkit, right? For example, to detect not only based on threshold, they can detect patterns, right? So for example, if they have multiple accounts within the bank, right? So they can track like, if this amount of money over a short period of time, right, even it's a small amount, jump across multiple accounts, right? They can flag it as a suspicious pattern, right? So bank has all this in their toolkit. But when it comes to smaller businesses, it's going to be a bit tough, right? Because all this costs money, right? So what I would think fundamental to all businesses is that they need to first, right, at the top, management level, they need to set the tone, right, within the business to say that, well, we don't deal with criminal proceeds, right? And so for the senior management, like directors, they must know that if they deal with criminal proceeds, two things can happen. One, it is an offense and they can go to jail. Secondly, the amount of the money that you make out of this transaction, it can be confiscated, right? So first, director level, they need to understand this and they must set the tone to everybody in the company, right? And after this change in mindset, they need to put in place, for example, risk assessment measures, right? So they need to understand, in my business, what are the services, products that can be abused by criminals to launder money, right? And then from there, they can, for example, put in place simple control measures, right, to detect suspicious activities, right? So for example, very simple things, like for example, I always encourage small businesses, when you deal with business transactions, right, if your customers comes to you and, for example, right, give you a bag of cash, right, do you accept it? Obviously, it's going to be very difficult for you to explain why can't you transfer the money through the bank, right? Unless you're excluded from the bank, right? But nowadays, it's quite rare that a person can be excluded from the bank. You must have done something wrong, right? So first thing, cash, anonymous payment, be careful, right? And then round tripping, for example, customer who comes to you and for no reason tell you to transfer this money to another account, be very, very sensitive to this kind of transaction. This is very simple ways of preventing money laundering, right? Or businesses, right? Sometimes we deal with refunds, right? Customer may want to purchase something from you, but eventually they cancel the order. They may ask you for return of money, right? When you return money, you always have to return to the same bank account that you receive money from. So these are very simple steps that business can do to help protect their transactions and also their business from all this being abused by criminal, right? And does it require a lot of technology implementation? It doesn't, right? You just need to have basic knowledge about what is suspicious, educate employees, and try to encourage them to flag out all this kind of suspicious transactions. And if you, let's say you are regulated and you want to go a step further, right? Under the regulation, same thing in Singapore and in Vietnam, right? If you are regulated for anti-money laundering, you need to perform customer due diligence, right? Meaning that under certain circumstances, right, you need to put in place processes to identify your counterparties and also to verify the identity, right? And this requires a lot more processes to be in place and a lot more paperwork, a lot more documentation, and that's where you can make use of technologies to help you do things like, for example, documentation, right? Or reminders, setting reminders to review your transaction with your client, or detecting fake identity, right? So for example, one of our capabilities in our system is that we can use AI to detect, for example, a criminal who replaced their face with some stolen identity on the identity card. So you can use AI to detect this kind of fake, right? So there are technologies in place which don't cost a lot of money. If you are so-called you are dealing with higher risk kind of transaction and you are also regulated, these are the things that you can put in place. But otherwise, for all businesses, I would say simple steps will be sufficient, right?
Yeah. So to sum up, like, I mean, for Vietnam, right? Like you say, we need to set a tone as the top. Like you got to have a strong regulators, but then also as the executive level, as the accountant, right? How much do you think the role of accountant play into combating this money laundering? Because accountant nowadays, you know, they're handling money, but we never thought about someday that they have to think about where this money come from. Usually they deal with money, right? So I mean, I just like, you know, what role do accountant and company service providers and lawyer play in protecting the integrity of the business environment from the threat?
Right. Actually, it's a very good question. I always think that businesses or professions like lawyer, accountants, company services providers, I always think that they are the first line of defense, right? It's not the bank. It's no longer the bank, right? Why they are the first line of this defense is because for accountants, for lawyers, for company service providers, they deal with the customer. They know more about the customers than the bank. right? What does the bank know? The bank only know transaction, right? You open a bank account, first time, they know the customer by what you do at that point in time. But subsequently, when your transaction, it's very difficult for the bank to know what is the purpose of transaction. But the accountants know, right? Accountants, lawyers, company service providers know because they are in contact with the customers all the time. They know their business, they know what is their volume, what products they sell. So they know much more about the customers than the bank, right? That's why I always think that they play a very important role because they are the first line of defense in this whole thing, scheme of things for anti-money laundering, right? So being in the first line of defense means that you can't, and a lot of all these professionals in Vietnam, they are regulated. That means they are in Vietnam law, they call it reporting entities, right? They are required to carry out preventive measures, right? So you can't claim that, oh, I'm just an accountant, I manage the book, I totally don't know anything about what my customers do, right? So because you're regulated, you have to, so we have customers who say, well, since I'm regulated, I'll just do what they ask me to do, but I'll just go through the checklist, right? Without thinking, right? But actually, if you look at this whole thing about anti-money laundering, it's also a way for you to protect your business so that you don't get into trouble with the law, right? If you imagine if you're a public accountant and then you find that your good name is being abused by criminals to launder money, hey, that's your reputation down the drain, right? That you have built over decades, right? So it's important for you to understand that you are a target for criminal, right? And being a first line of defense, you need to put in place your weapons, right? Like your machine gun, your grenades and all that, right? So you have to have the tools, right? So what are these tools you need to put in place? Include, for example, you need to do risk assessment, right? Okay, what are the services I provide? What kind of customer do I deal with, right? Where do they come from? So there's certain so-called risk assessment methods that you can use, right, to assess your exposure to money laundering. And then once you understand this, you can put in place more effective controls, right, to make sure that whoever you deal with, your counterparties, your customers, they are using your service for legitimate purposes, right? And then there are also ways for you to monitor your client, right, on what they do, right? So these are the things that accountants or professions who are regulated need to put in place, right? So, and I would say, if they do this well, we can probably stop a lot of all these criminal money laundering schemes going through the economy, right? So, yeah, they are very important.
Yeah. So you mentioned about something very interesting because you AI to combat AI, right? So they use AI to scam people, and now you're using AI to actually kind of figure out how to combat them, right? So we always heard about the term KYC, know your customer. So in Ingenic, right, how your software help the non-financial sectors to combat this using AI?
So for us, we do have a few toolkits, right? So for example, I mentioned earlier on detecting fake ID, right? So that's one way we use AI. And moving forward, we will be trying to automate a lot of things to make it more convenient and efficient for professionals like accountants do KYC, right? So for example, with AI, nowadays, why are you still filling forms? Right? It shouldn't be a case where I need to fill forms. AI should be doing this for me, the manual work, right? So we're developing capabilities in that, right? Hopefully, if we can make use of AI, right? There's no need for accountants to fret over, oh, do I need to get this document? Do I need to get this signed by customers, right? All this will be advised from AI, right? And if you can even push it to be like virtual, right? That means I don't need a person to interface with this kind of work. That is even best. That is even better, right? That means what I can visualize is that AI, right, should be doing the KYC for human, right, rather than human doing themselves. Because I believe a lot of this work can be automated. And what the human factor that comes into play is whatever output from the AI. I mean, it doesn't mean that human are totally not needed, right? So whatever output from AI, the human with the experience they gain throughout their business, they will be able to tell, oh, this suggestion from AI, what are the gaps, and these are the things I need to focus on when I'm doing my KYC, right? So this is something that I hope we can see more in the market. Yeah, and if we have these tools, right, what this means is that, well, criminals, they have the resources to buy the latest technologies, right? Then we need to upgrade so that we can fight them, right? So here in Engineering, we are trying to build this capability so that we can give a better weapons for them to fight against the enemy. Yeah.
Okay, so to sum up, can you tell the audience about for upcoming relationship between Singapore and Vietnam, what sort of thing that Vietnam market need to do, right, in the short term in order to combat the financial crime?
Okay, so if as far as I understand, I think AML law in Vietnam got revised last year, right, in reaction, in answering to the requirements by Financial Action Task Force. I believe one of the key gaps is for the designated non-financial and business and profession, right? That means those who are regulated for anti-money laundering. I think that's a key gap because one of the things highlighted was that the knowledge about money laundering or anti-money laundering among the non-bank sectors is very low, right? And yet they are the first line of defense, right? So I think as far as Vietnam is concerned, I would say that first we need to educate these non-bank sectors, right, on their role and the importance of their role, right, in combating illicit funds, right? First, education, then give them put in place tools, right, to simple things. I would say I always encourage small steps, right? So put in place simple processes, controls within the business, and then if let's say they think that the volume is too much, then they can think about productivity tools like those that many people, many vendors out there, right, including ourselves, right? You can look at these kind of tools, right? And when you look at these kind of tools, of course, then it comes to which one is better, right? So I will say, of course, firstly, you need to make sure that kind of tools can help you, right? And not only help you, can make sure that, one of the problems we have in AML, right, is that you will be collecting a lot of personal information about your client, right? And given the privacy law in many jurisdictions, people tend to be wary, right, when they give personal information. Right. So you need the tools that you use, right, must give you the confidence that the personal information that you store in these tools are protected, right, to the best of your ability, right? So look out for not only productivity but also privacy part of the requirement, right? So that you can be confident and your client can be confident when I submit my private information, it will not be leaked, right? So these are the things that I think progressively moving forward, I believe when as Vietnam's economy is growing very fast, right? I believe it can even do better if let's say we get everybody together to make sure that the economy in Vietnam is not a conduit for money laundering. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Martin. And this is the end of the episode. And make sure that you subscribe to Ball Flick and Ball Library. This episode is going to be available on Ball Library. Thank you again, Martin. And looking forward for the next event.
Thank you.
Thank you.